Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we are talking with two principals from the Lewinsville Faith In Action, which is an all-volunteer organization that came together after the Women's March on January 21st to discover within their community, a core community that was a group of people within the Lewinsville Presbyterian Church, to find groups, find people that had an interest in pursuing very specific things that they felt needed addressing. And so the church, while they offer space, this group is apart from the church, and they have opened their doors to lots of other people who've gotten involved through their interest groups. And so I would like to welcome to our show tonight Jack Calhoun and Cindy Speas. Thank you both so much for being here.
Delighted to be here.
So the election happened. I don't know if anybody remembers the day after the election. My husband says he can't remember anything that happened on November 8th, just nothing at all. He can't remember. It was a black period. But along with hundreds of thousands of other people, we were also at the Women's March, and it was astonishing to see the people who turned up. It was astonishing to see the signs. It was astonishing to see the pictures of women on trains and airplanes coming into D.C. It was astonishing to see the women's marches around the world on every continent and every city. So tell me a little bit about how the two of you came together with others to figure out how to launch this.
Why don't you start, Cindy?
Well,
with the women's march?
We had a young woman who was at the march. We were also at the march. She came away from that so energized by the solidarity and the passion of the people. And of course, you know, it was very tight quarters, if you'll remember that.
Couldn't move.
Couldn't move. So you got to know the people around you very well. There we all were, like-minded people who had come away from the election extremely depressed, thinking we were alone, very solitary, and suddenly there was all of this energy. And she wanted to continue that. She knew she needed that passion to keep her supported through what we knew were going to be and have been very dark times. So she asked around her community at church, and there were 25 of us at the first meeting. Some of us are active non-members, some of us are members, some of us are friends and family. And Jack and I were there, and our backgrounds lent us some energy and some fun to participate in leadership with her. It's amazing. One person can make such a big difference. And that from that small group of 25, we now have about 53, 54 people who are on our email list. Varying degrees of us participate in the ongoing activities. But we started with one person, and we've made a difference, I think, and continue to.
It's the amazing story of the Women's March was also one person's idea, and it caught fire. It was like a contagion. It was like it bloomed across the planet, which is quite remarkable. But isn't that, Jack, the power of community organizing?
Well, you know, it's fascinating to hear this. And the young woman's name is Maggie Lineberger, who is just fabulous and did this, younger than me by about 14 centuries. And what's beautiful about all of this, it reminded me of how I got started, which was through civil rights. And I've been very involved in policy on the state level and the federal level. And I met a woman who had lost 2 kids to gang violence, Maddie Lawson. And here I was, top level state policymaker, top level federal. And she said, I've lost 2 children to gang violence, but now I have 400. No other kid in my neighborhood will die. And I thought to myself, you have forgotten, Calhoun, what got you started in the first place, which was the street, the passion, the faces, the average person, not the policymakers, saying, enough, I can make a difference. And it was Martin Luther King who profoundly influenced me. And I started with community organizing in Boston and youth work, and then began to move. But it was Maddie who brought me back really to this and to this energy. But then the challenge for us both was, how do you structure this in a way that has structure but doesn't cap the spirit and to keep the energy? And that in itself was a task of focusing on the political work, the legislative work, the candidacy work, the picketing, the witness that Cindy has done so beautifully in airports and in mosques. And the second piece, quite frankly, is being conscious that this is a beloved community. And by that, I mean Trump is lighting so many fires. Here, here, here. Where do I start? Just me? I can't do anything. I'm going to take piano lessons. I can't do it. So the second piece is that this is really transformational if you get your teeth into it. But it's also transactional. There's stuff to get done. And the final piece was this, that we were very conscious about, is to have this theologically grounded. It's policy grounded, but also there's another dimension. Sessions lies about Russia, and Cindy's husband, John, holds up a sign on the street corner saying, "Thou shalt not bear false witness."
Absolutely.
Judeo-Christian tradition profoundly about welcoming the stranger. Thou art a stranger in a strange land. You shall welcome the stranger as I got you out of Egypt, and you are a stranger. So really 3 parts was the membership, was the physical action, the beloved community, and the theological ground. And I think that also has a pragmatic dimension. You can argue policy, but then you have another card to play. And somebody might think twice. You might just resonate a theological chord there. Who knows?
Right, and so progressive Christians, there are those who may not think that that's anything other than a unicorn. Because so much of what Trump's policy is based on is answering to an evangelical, conservative, very conservative, the Muslim ban, you know, rolling back birth control. I mean, every day it astonishes me, like, where does he come up with this stuff? But, so tell me a little bit, Cindy, about progressive Christians, because clearly you're looking to theology, to the Bible, to the teachings of Jesus to guide you in this, but there are other people who look there and they find something different.
Well, that's true, certainly, and it always has been throughout history and the differences between religions. But in our view as progressive Christians, a loving God requires us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And that's the core of it. And you can find a biblical argument anywhere you want to go to, but that main theme is what drives us. And of course, there's the deep ethical beliefs and moral beliefs of those who may not be as Christian or a part of the Judaic Christian tradition, our Muslim brothers and sisters. But they too find that love propels us to do the best that we can for the least of us. And so in every single one of our core issues, that's what we are trying to live and what we are trying to convey. And we've had some amazing partners in this. That's another.
I've got to just pick up on that. It's such a key question, Catherine. Historically, the faith community in this country led the seismic social movements. The Civil War, the abolitionists, the women's movement coming out of Chautauqua, religiously based, civil rights in the 50s. When you look, my grandson was born at Mount Sinai Presbyterian Hospital. Most of the universities were started with a theological base. I mean, and the Federalist Papers, the very Constitution, was based on a view of man, we're precious in the eyes of God, but we also have will to power. We have will to control. Theologically, we are fallen. Therefore, we need checks and balances.
There you
Legislative, administrative, the law. And do we ever need checks and balances now?
We do. And this is more than just arguing theology, because let's talk immigration. You mentioned the Muslim ban and showing up at the airport. These are people's lives that are being affected. And a lot of these, the immigrant community does belong to our church faith communities, many different faith communities.
Right.
So, you know, in working, let's say specifically in the immigrant community, you have built a coalition. What are some of the groups that you have worked with to try to add your voice and your activism?
Very much so. The Presbyterian Church USA has an Office of Public Witness. One of the things that we're very lucky in this area is that we're close to our federal offices and activities as we are to our local and state activities. The Office of Public Witness has been following the DREAM Act has been very communicative with us. We've had their executive director come and speak with us. They do training for advocacy. We have done public witness where rallies and feet on the ground were important, and I think that, well, I should mention Jennifer Butler's Faith in Action, Faith in Public Policy. There's William Barber and...
I love William Barber. I was part of the Moral Monday March 3 years ago.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I saw him speak at Netroots Nation, too,
It's
in Detroit.
unbelievable.
So it's aligning ourselves with those kind of powerful voices so that we don't feel alone, that we're really able to maximize our impact.
And I think the core point is this has been an essential part of the religious tradition. There is the liturgical, there is the church, but prophetic witness and speaking truth to power has been at the quintessence of the most religious movements, based on, as Cindy said, theologically. But part of our issue was, and I'm sure we can get into this point, is how to claim everybody's passion and not have everybody feel overwhelmed in this group. That was a key organizational piece for us, because there's so much coming at everybody.
Right, so you're working on electing other progressives that represent your core values, gerrymandering, I know, which is something I'm working on, immigration, gun violence,
Yes.
And what is the fifth?
Health. Climate and health.
Climate
and health, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, and there are a lot of people who are really more focused on one of those issues than they might care about all of those, but they really want to put their passion, their activism, and their time behind one.
Yes.
And that was key for us because, and I think Cindy was wiser than I in this, realizing it first. I mean, there was a tsunami of information and everybody was getting everything. Enough already. So you claim your passion. I'm into climate. I'm into gun stuff. So give me information on
those
that.
Things.
And then if there is something that all can be part of, a march or on the 14th of every month, picketing in front of the NRA.
That's a standard 14th every month, and that's to commemorate the Sandy Hook
murders,
shooting,
yes.
In December 14th.
That's right. And so a key organizational piece was breaking us up into interest groups, so everybody's passion could be claimed.
Well, that's a good note on which to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Cindy Speas and Jack Calhoun of Lewinsville Faith in Action. So please join us after the break, and we're going to help you understand how they built this model and how you can get involved.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation.
You're resigning.
Why? You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
Oh, I forgot. I'll do better.
Please don't quit on me.
Don't let your heart quit on you. Get your uncontrolled high blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late.
So you can't save money? That's easy as pie. Brown bag your lunch instead of going out. $6 save times 5 days a week times 10 years is $21,000. That's a lot of lettuce. Small changes today, big bucks tomorrow. Feedthepig.org.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls. But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected.
I'm putting that on my blog.
I just put it in mine.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your hosts.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Cindy Speas and Jack Calhoun of Lewinsville Faith In Action. This is a group that works from a faith-based tradition to tackle issues such as immigration, gun violence, gerrymandering, and electing progressives to office, as well as health care and issues of climate change. So thank you both for being here.
It's great to be here.
So when we went on our break, we were talking a little bit about the monthly vigil that happens every 14th of every month in front of the NRA headquarters here in Fairfax, because Fairfax, Virginia is home to the national headquarters. You know, we are uniquely positioned because of our proximity to Washington, D.C. We're 2 hours away from Richmond, which is our state capital. We have a lot of associations here. We have a lot of lawmakers who live here. A lot of them live just over the border in Virginia. You know, talking about gun violence specifically, Jack, you know, how does this position a group like yours or any group that happens to be right where we are to be more effective or to take actions that might make more of a difference than somebody living in, let's say, Oklahoma or Montana?
Well, this is really a good question. I'd answer it in two ways. First of all, you are approximate, as you said. I mean, the NRA is just off Route 50. You can see it when you go out Route 66. It's there. And second, we're not too far from Richmond, and a lot of this is going to be won in state houses. There are two legislative bills coming up. The first one is the most incredibly disingenuous bill I've ever heard of. It's called the Hearing Protection Act, which is pro-gun silencers, which means if I'm shooting somebody, I don't want to hurt my tender ears. So the bill is called the Hearing Protection Act. The second one is called the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act. So if I'm in a state with wide open gun stuff, I can take guns in hospitals, schools, churches, restaurants. Let's say I'm in Nevada. I can carry in California, New York, or Massachusetts. Their analog is a license. I have a driver's license. I don't have to change it at the border. And those two bills are going to kill more people. Law enforcement does not like them either. So the opportunity, I mean, you asked me about this, we have Congress right here. And for me, it's a particular note of passion because I've been working in violence prevention and community building for most of my life. And in the United States, our crime rates are the same or better than most Western democratic cities, London, Vancouver, Frankfurt, until you throw in guns. And then we go through the roof.
It's incredible. 32,000 deaths a year for over a decade.
Yes.
It's a toxin in the civic bloodstream. Congress will act. When spinach was tainted, they took it off the shelves. Seatbelts, airbags,
smoking.
All of this. Smoking.
Limiting smoking. Because it was a public health crisis, but that's not the conversation we're having around guns. We are not saying that gun violence and gun deaths are a public health crisis, even though if this was a germ that had just killed, 58 people in Vegas and harmed 500 others, we'd be going, oh, we've got to solve the problem. We've got to go in the lab and kill the germ.
Exactly.
We are not having that conversation about guns.
You got a lot of docs now speaking up, a lot of emergency room docs. They are health professionals speaking up, but you're right, it hasn't shifted to the sort of toxin framing that you're talking about. It still is my right to own it. I went into a gun store in Texas with my board chairman about 10 years ago. He kept saying, Calhoun, you got to understand guns. I mean, it's part of a culture. So it's an amazing gun store with very aesthetically done guns embedded in amber. And I saw this gun that could take out a school bus. And I said, I want that. And he put it on the table. And I said, do I have to show you anything? He said, no, you're a friend of David's. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, well, I just got out of jail after 50 years for murdering my whole family. You know, I was just kidding him. And he looked a little, I could have gotten away with something that could take out a school bus, showing nothing.
Yeah, you know, there was a public service announcement recently with a young man trying to buy cigarettes and going to all these places, this young teenager, and he kept being turned away because he wasn't old enough until he got to the gun store, and then he could buy a gun.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
Exactly. Cindy's been involved in a number of issues. Why don't you reflect on some of those?
Well, we were talking about feet on the ground at the NRA and also in lobbying on Capitol Hill, particularly for these two issues. I think it's going to be crucial. But some of the other things that we've done where people's passion may be elsewhere has involved around the environmental issues. We've been particularly, we were talking earlier about the pipelines as a current Virginia issue, and the leader of our environmental group has been very involved with Sierra Club and other groups. There's also a group called the Fairfax Alliance for Climate Solutions. I should say, Faith Alliance. It's based in Fairfax, but it's Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. And we have worked a lot together. We've been in front of the Board of Supervisors. We've signed petitions to get to support students to get solar panels.
Right, they're taking that on at the school board. I think this Thursday.
And there was a hearing on that last week at the school board. So, and in the Climate March. So that gives you the proximity to, again, experience the kinds of things we experienced at the Women's March, where we are feeling pretty grim about losing our air quality standards and having drilling in the Arctic and all of the other horrible things that we see coming across. It gives us a chance to be with like-minded people and like-minded organizations that are national, League of Conservation Voters, et cetera.
Well, you've touched on something really important here, though. You just talked about the Board of Supervisors and the school board. So I brought up Richmond and Washington, but really there are things you can do in your town government. Exactly. I live in the city of Fairfax. There you can go before your city council. You can put proposals for solar panels in front of the school board. Talk a little bit about how you're trying to help people understand it's not just the big policy, to Jack's point, but there's small S policies that can be enacted.
Absolutely. Well, my background was in community education, so I know how important it is to start with the good story and work at a level where people feel comfortable. And interestingly enough, that is really the passion of our group. They are much more comfortable, I think, from their experience and their knowledge of talking with our local delegates in the races, of going to the school boards, of being in front of the Board of Supervisors. I think a lot of them have similar experience. I mean, I haven't asked each one, but it's clear that that's something that they are comfortable with. I don't think we have to convince them. I think we have to convince others.
But this, I think, brings up a really key point in terms of how we keep our feet under us after a big election like the gubernatorial election. Because some may see this as sort of prosaic and Lego block building. You mean you're worried about a school board election? You're worried about this? But that's how the Republicans did it 25 years ago. Block by block by block. And I think the other point you bring up, Catherine, which is really key around the gun issue, is to frame it in a way that makes it more Catholic. You use the health issue.
Yeah, it's a health crisis.
And the climate change and the gun issue gets labeled as a left issue, whereas it's an issue of life and death.
It really is.
Or what air am I going to breathe? My kid's got asthma. So I think part of the work is to de-party it and to make it as universally applicable as possible. I mean, 32,000 gun deaths. Come on, that's not a political issue. That's my kid who could be at a movie theater or in a park. Or Cindy's work with the climate change.
You know, and you read it we've almost gotten numb to it. I read an article today that a Virginia Tech player who was the MVP of the game on Saturday, his brother got shot and killed in D.C. Like the same night. And we've kind of gotten numb to seeing headlines like, oh, this kid's brother got killed, was shot to death. You know, and so like tomorrow's another headline, it's another day. But that's a real person. That's a real family. That really happened. And in the repercussions, it's not just to the immediate family, and they're talking about this, the PTSD of an entire community around Las Vegas. Those people are going to take years to recover from having been at a music concert and suddenly having been shot. So I don't know going forward how we help people to remove the partisanship. How do we do that, Cindy? How do we make this not a polarizing us, them, left, right?
And of course our group came together because they were feeling that polarization. So we have to find a way, I think, to be true to our values And also look at language that we can use for reconciliation with those that are different. And as Jack said, take it out of the issue of, this is not a Second Amendment issue when we're talking about guns. This is a health issue. This is about your children, it's about your neighbor's children, and it's about taking care of God's creation. So there's this ethical, moral, and theological underpinning about taking it away from one party.
And back to your points, Cindy, about people getting inured to it. Another shooting, another this, another this. I think that's one of the key elements of this group, is because you can feel pretty overwhelmed, and another loss here and another, but coming together and being able to re-encourage, re-heart us is really important, because so much of this stuff makes us alone. I mean, Thune's comment from North Dakota after the shooting, you know what he said about protecting yourself? He said, get small. How big were the children in Newtown? His response was, get small. Well, when you hear that, you can either get really angry, or you can say, if that's what we're up against, what? And that, to me, is one reason this group is, and groups like it throughout the country, is so important to keep our feet under us, because we got a lot of work to do.
And people have to feel like they're making a difference.
Yes.
They do.
Like, I mean, in sustaining it, and we're going to talk a little bit more about sustaining it, because when you feel like you're getting petitions signed and you're showing up to the rally and you're testifying in front of the school board, or it feels like I did something tangible, and and people are hearing me, and I've raised my hand and I've shown up. Showing up is 95% of life. But then how, in the face of, and this is going to happen, the face of disappointment, how do we keep people engaged?
Right. Yes. It's a challenge, one of the challenges that we face, and I think that certainly people expect immediate reward. But we have to look at the long game, and that's been sort of a mantra of ours at each of our meetings, that it's not just about this election, but it's about the election in 2018 and in 2020, and maybe even beyond if we don't get bipartisan redistricting, or nonpartisan redistricting would be the ideal.
Absolutely. So we in Virginia are unique because we have elections every year. Yeah. And that leads to voter fatigue. It also leads to candidate fatigue.
Exactly.
And I don't know that we're going to solve those problems in the short term. The one-term governor is a problem. There's a lot of problems. But I do think the fact that as Virginians, and speaking specifically to this Commonwealth, we're helping people to understand some of the real-life hurdles that we have to overcome. So when we come back from our break, we're going to be talking with Cindy Speas and Jack Calhoun of the Lewinsville Faith in Action about how we sustain the work that all of us are so passionately interested in doing.
Guess what? I have some news for you. There's free food right there, junk food. You see that truck? Oh, jeez. It's a 2 Michelin star chef. All for free, ladies and gentlemen. All for free.
Here we have a panzanella with summer vegetables and pesto. Enjoy. How we doing?
So what do you got going on underneath that plate there?
This food is really about to be thrown away.
Yeah.
Bro? Is there something wrong with this food? Where did you get it from?
From farmers markets. They put aside the ugly vegetables and the ugly fruits.
Carrot top, soft avocados. It was all food that was going to be discarded.
Even the drink you had is made from like a little bruised peach. Did it taste a little bruised?
Great. It's good.
The average person throws away 24 pounds of food a month.
That's a lot.
Isn't that a lot? Go visit SaveTheFood.com for more information. Thank you. Junk food time!
we're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we are talking with Cindy Speas and Jack Calhoun of Lewinsville Faith in Action. Thank you both for being here, and what I want to talk about now is your resistance school, which is an intriguing concept to me. So tell us a little bit about how the resistance school came about.
Well, like you said, this is in fact the resistance school, famously known in the New York Times as Dumbledore's Army, for all Harry Potter fans out there. This was a school that was started, an organizing school, started by some students and professors from the Harvard School of Government, Kennedy Center School of Government. It's not sponsored by them, but by the government.
But that just happens to be their own community.
This is their
just
community,
like your community,
just like
ours.
ours.
Their community came together.
They pulled together 4 fabulous speakers in the first semester, and this was last April and May. And we had a core group of about 10 of us. So, you know, we have a larger group. But 10 came together to form what would be called our own resistance organizing group. And we watched all of the presentations. We talked about them afterwards, and it propelled us, using a model that they had, to do the really hard work of trying to figure out what in the world were we about? What were we passionate about? What could we agree on? What could be a mission statement? Because we flailed around at the beginning with a mission statement, and it was full of a lot of stuff.
But a lot of organizations struggle with that. All of them do.
So it was exciting to see everybody excited about this. And we went through 2 really long sessions of organizing. And we came out of it with a mission statement, what the Harvard group calls the shared purpose. And I think most organizing grassroots organizations look to that as opposed to the NGO idea of a mission vision.
Right.
So we came up with a shared purpose, which I think speaks volumes about this group. And then out of a long 3-hour session, we came up with about 18 different activities that we thought that we could do and would achieve that purpose or make us all feel better that we were moving in that direction. We saw in those activities these issue groups that we've been talking about. So out of all of that came the bare bones of an organization. Okay, we want to do more good internal communications to keep our spirits buoyed, right? But we want to do good external. That's next. We have that ahead of us to maybe get a website, maybe do a newsletter, maybe reach out to other groups that we need more hands on deck to make that happen, but it's a great goal. And then our other issue groups, gun violence, environment, electoral politics, redistricting. So we're very excited about what that meant, and our shared purpose is something that others will resonate with, I think, if they're thinking about starting a group like ours. But if I have it right, I think Jack challenge me if I don't get it exactly right. But it's informed by faith and fact. In Lewinsville Faith in Action, in partnership with others, seeks to advocate for political, social, economic, and environmental policy based on fairness and justice.
Wow. She got it.
You did. Nailed it.
She nailed it.
Good job. Good job. So this is
exciting.
It is exciting, but let's talk about reality just for a second.
But there's one other reality. I have to interrupt you.
Okay.
In that structure is also a psychological structure, which is not only can any institution play, but if I'm an introvert, I can play. I can write postcards. I can do research.
Op-eds. Lots of things where you don't have to be with the people.
If I'm an extrovert, I'll knock on doors. I'll get out there and picket. So in addition to this wonderful structure that Cindy has described, and we sweated through it at her house, and often a glass of wine helped.
I always think red wine.
Absolutely.
Was this, some people saying, I don't know how to do that. But everybody, a shut-in in a retirement home, can do a stack of postcards. So that's an important piece, that all are welcome and all can play. and all can be affirmed. So excuse me, you had a
No,
question.
but so this is important because I assume that you don't want this to be something that has a spike and then a drop-off.
Yep.
But those of us who've been engaged in electoral politics knows that no matter how wonderful the candidates, no matter how excited we are, November 8th comes along like like last November, and people will be disappointed.
Yep.
And it will seem like you spent all this time and all this urgency and every fiber of your being resonated right up until election night, and then you wake up the next day and you're like, how could this have happened? And the reason I say this, and gerrymandering factors into this, in 2015, we spent $45 million on House and Senate races, 140 races, and every single incumbent won re-election in 2015. So you get up the next morning, and both the people who spent so much time and energy and put so much of their heart into it, but the candidates who did as well are like, how could this have happened? And gerrymandering is the first problem we have to solve. So how are you going to try to hold your people together on
They're interested in this, believe it or not, and they've educated themselves about it. I mean, One Virginia 2021 has been a fabulous feet on the ground getting us involved through the League of Women Voters, and their jury-rigged video is awesome.
Fantastic.
And you can see it, of course, online, but the point is getting people together. So they have them all over the state. Their executive director and all their staff go out to try to engage people so that when the election comes and the desired results don't happen, and I think we're going to see that in some cases.
I think it's kind of inevitable.
But we're going to be the first to have elections of our delegates before we go to redistricting.
That's right.
So if we are able, and we know there are some lawsuits pending before the Supreme Court.
The Wisconsin case in front of the Supreme Court, and One Virginia 2021 has one in front of the Virginia Supreme Court over 11 districts.
Yes.
And one of the things, volunteering-wise, so on primary day, I was out there getting petition signatures for One Virginia 2021. And I filled up all my sheets and turned them over and used the back. And I found that once you explained what gerrymandering was and the fact that primary voters were out there because they believe in the system, primary voters, which are the tiniest of the tiniest percent, came out because they believe the system works. So that was my hook for them. I'm like, you came here because you think the system works. Let me explain to you what gerrymandering is. And if we don't solve this problem, your vote matters less and less every time the districts are redrawn by the legislators. And they're like, where do I sign? What? So I think we had 600 volunteers that day on primary day, and I know that One Virginia 2021 is looking for volunteers to stand at the polls and explain gerrymandering to the people who have enough faith in the system to have come out and vote.
Catherine, I hope you're going to train some of us who are going to do that, because some of us have signed up to do that
Happy to do it. I'm like, I really maxed out my sheets. It is messaging, right, Jack?
Yeah.
It's messaging. How do you frame this? Not as a Republican, Democrat. I waited until they voted, too. I didn't try to get them on the way in. I got them on the way out and said, let me explain something about what you believe.
Excellent.
Exactly.
Right? Excellent.
Do you think your vote counts?
Do you think your vote counts? Because I can show you that in 2015 it really didn't.
Well, and Don Beyer has a piece of legislation that he's interested in, and I think that if we could have, it's not instant runoff voting, although I would like it to be, but it's about having multiple districts put together so that we can elect multiple representatives from a larger district, and it would be more representative of the people in that district. And I forget exactly what the terminology is.
Yeah, and actually that used to be that way in Virginia a long time ago. Ken Plum was part of that group. He ended up running 3 times before he got elected. Then once he finally got elected, he had to run because they changed the districts and divided up this larger district with 3 representatives into individual districts. Yeah, Ken is an interesting guy.
And I think back on this issue, it's such a good question about sustainability. Unfortunately, there will be no shortage of issues. We will have them coming at us. I'm very passionate about the upcoming election, and hopefully this election, of Barbara Comstock, who has gotten 137,000 plus from the NRA. That's one, and I think the other is as sort of fatuous as it sounds, but it's real, is keeping the connection. That there's an intimacy about this group, calling each other by name and bringing us together, because it can get lonely and it can get really hard. So I think part of this, I mean, we occasionally meet each other's houses. We meet in the church a lot, and thank you to the faculty, I was going to say, the staff at Lewinsville for allowing us the space. But we often meet at each other's houses and share a meal. And that is so key, that we know each other. And we have each other's backs. Can you help us? We need more bodies for picketing for this. And at my age, you got to be careful. One, you have to know where the porta potties are.
Right, there you go.
And two, I got to have a name tag in case I get lost, so somebody overturn me. But a piece of that, and again, as small as that sounds, being together, picketing, is an amazing
I believe
experience
that.
of solidarity.
I believe that. Jonathan Haidt wrote a wonder. He was at UVA when he wrote the book, The Happiness Hypothesis. And it studies all major religions. And, he's trying to drill down into what is it that makes people happy. And one of the things that he came up with is people want a sense of autonomy, a sense of community, and a sense of spirituality.
Interesting.
And this is what answers that. It's like I can pick my issue, but I have found my community, and it is based on being interested in something that is way larger than myself. It's a sense that there's a greater good, that there's a universe, that there's some theological underpinning, whether it's love or it's the betterment of mankind, but those three things, and I've always retained that from that book because I think he's right.
How would you like to help us write our brochure?
I could help you do that too.
Brilliant.
But you read enough and you experience enough too. I work with a lot of different nonprofits and organizations, and it seems like you're just always in warrior mode. I feel like I'm always in warrior mode. I'm working for NARAL, I'm working at Equality Virginia, I'm working for Virginia's list getting women elected. It's like every single day I'm doing something to move something forward, but I picked it. And I have communities among all those people for those efforts.
Is that a part of what keeps you going then?
Absolutely. I thrive on that. I really feel like that's the meaning in my life, is leaving everything better than I found it. And I also have children. And I think when you have children, you look at your children and you think, I'm working on paid leave, side note here, but I've got two daughters who are 30 and 31, and nothing has changed since the day they were born. Nothing has changed. The last developed country in the world not to provide any benefits for parents, but not for your mother if she's sick with cancer or anything else. So I look at that and I go, my obligation to my own children is to have done something about that I did not do.
Bravo. To say to and when my grandkids get older, they're going to say, what did you do then? Where were you? What did you do? And I've got 4 grandkids, and to see my 3 little girls who are in Vienna and worry at soccer games, not what's going to happen on the soccer field, but is somebody going to walk by?
Oh, absolutely.
And my grandson in New York, and same thing. And so, what did you do? Where were you, Grandpa?
What did you do? And that is the question that we're going to end this segment with. What did you do? And there is an opportunity for all of us to do more. So when we come back from this break, we're going to end our final segment of this show talking about how all of you can get involved in the things you care about.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice. Homeless minds. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home? When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is? What? More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow.
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent. Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives,
helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
I'm your host for Inside Scoop, Catherine Reed. Welcome to our final segment with Cindy Speas and Jack Calhoun of Lewinsville Faith in Action. What we're going to be talking about in this segment is looking beyond November 8th to how we sustain our community, how we keep our community focused, how we keep the momentum alive. How do we do that?
You want to start? You want
Sure.
me to? Go ahead, you roll.
I think we have been struggling with this from day one. How do we keep people engaged even now when it's so depressing and the news continues to batter us over and over and over again? How do we talk to our families when our families are split? We've had a lot of discussion of people in our groups who have found like-minded folks here but have struggles with their families, and how do we talk to them? This is a long haul. We've said it from the very beginning of our group. We've encouraged people to step back when things are too much. We've encouraged people to take breaks. We've encouraged people to try to find something that they are really passionate about and that they can own, and that they're certain actions that they're comfortable with. And then we look for this connectedness through meetings and rallies together. There's really nothing more wonderful than being together with other people to make you feel like you are not alone.
And knowledge.
And knowledge, thank you very much. That knowledge, trying to bring knowledge to the group of what's going on, what are the things they can do, trying to share information. So we are starting a lending library. We're all going to bring a good book. You know, we're starting with Dark Money and some of the Atlantic. I'm saving all my Atlantics to bring, so that people can continue. Those who don't like to use electronic media to read their news can come and get a good book and be buoyed by learning something new that they didn't know.
I will add to that by saying that I also encourage people to listen to audiobooks. When people are like, I do not have time to read, I'm like, do you commute?
Yep.
Do you jog? Do you walk? Do you garden?
Podcasts.
Do you cook? Right?
Yep.
And so
That's good.
a lot of the books that you're going to look at, if you go to audible.com, or you're going to find an audiobook and listen to it while you're doing something else.
Yes.
Because I get a lot of resistance with, I don't have time to read. Well, you have time to listen to a book if you're doing something
That's
else.
exactly right.
You know, just a couple of points on this. One is a chapter in my book, and I know we may talk about, it's called Pain Must Not Be Wasted. And as you suggest, there's going to be some pain after November. What do we do with that? What did we learn? And the second thing is, I think, is to take a page out of the book of what the faith community is doing in my field, its role in violence prevention and community building, and it's fascinating. I see it in three areas. One, at least you can be on the streets. I was at a peace march with a church in Baltimore called Over the Wall. Their sanctuary was not much bigger than this table. They have no money for a gym, but every week they go out into the community, to use your word, Catherine, they are present. They are present. They won't leave you. I love you, I won't leave you. The larger faith communities, midnight basketball, reentry, returning offenders. The DA in Brooklyn, Joe Hines, relationships with 100 mosques and synagogues, churches. He gets volunteers tutoring as tutors and mentors. So you have small churches can play, and this is an analog for us. Everybody can play. Small churches, tiny, bigger ones, and then the third piece is everybody can witness in some way, whether it's picketing or speaking truth to power, which is part of really every faith tradition, is what is power and what do we stand for. So to me, as we go forward, and there are going to be losses, is to remember in those areas you can still go, and pain must not be wasted.
Right.
I mean, the mother who lost 2 kids,
right?
And she said, I'm turning this into healing. I'm moving.
So we've gotten a call from Stuart who's asking how can he get involved? Since you mentioned you don't have a website, if people want to be part of your community, find out more information, how do they reach out to you?
Well, I think the easiest way is to use our email address. Mine is my name, Cindy Speas. I don't know whether it's going to run on the screen or
it
not.
Will.
Cindy Speas at gmail.com, and yours is?
HopeMatters@Verizon.net.
And Hope Matters, you do have a website. That's your blog, isn't it?
That's my blog.
Yeah,
yes.
Hope Matters is your blog.
Yes.
And you have a book. And the interesting thing about your book, which is called Policy Walking, is that policy is something that we need to kind of get people focused on prior to the legislative session in Richmond, which is only 60 days, starts in January, ends in March. And if you want to continue working on policy issues rather than elections, you know, our post-election distress syndrome or whatever we're going to call that.
Great place.
Right, so that's what we really need to do, is we need to focus on policy and how can we take informed, educated people and have them go lobby their legislators, show up to policy sessions, write op-eds, email their legislators, make the phone calls.
Exactly.
Well, and we can do General Assembly Day. I mean, we can go and as a group, but by then we'll know what pieces of legislation will require our attention.
Absolutely, because Jack has mentioned too that we don't want to see pass. I previously had Andy Goddard here on the show talking about gun violence, and he's done a matrix of all the bills that he follows every year. Most of them the bad bills, and a few good bills. But yeah, Andy Goddard also, and so there are organizations, to your point, if people want to know information about specific policy issues or legislative areas, whether it's climate change or it's gerrymandering, there are organizations, there are websites, there are books, there are articles, there's all kinds of information.
Exactly. Yes. And again, I get back to in this book, there are a lot of policy books. And to me, the reason I wrote this is amazing people who embody the policies. So you can feel what they do, you can feel their passion. And it's a whole variety of issues. And back to the word presence, the opening chapter is on Kevin Grant, who's a street worker, 11, 12 at night, he's out there. And I wanted to see how he did his work. So first thing he told me, he said, "You have the wrong threads for gang work, man." Then he asked me what I drove, and I said a Subaru, this was earlier. He said, "Man, you got to get a lowrider with Hot Wheels." And then I said, "If you're so good, Kevin, and you've got your boys on the corner, what's the first thing you say?" He said, "Hey, loved one." I said, "What?" He said, "Hey, loved one." It was the language of connection and presence first. Then they'll work on the fixing, the dyslexia or the dropping out or the anger. But the first word was, "Hey, loved one," or "Hey, nephew." And so that's the opening chapter, which doesn't appear in many policy books. Who's out there? Who says, "I love you, I won't leave you," as opposed to, "I'm here just to fix you"? So that's chapter one, and then I go through a lot of other policies, reentry policy and nurse-family partnership, getting to vulnerable mothers when they're young. But I've tried to write it. My goal has been to make it really tangible and not from
not top down. Policies need to be from the bottom up, which is why we have to better train people to see themselves as advocates.
Yes.
If you've lived it, if you've lost your children, if you've got a child with and I've worked with the Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, 2 years in a row they got legislation passed, and it was because these parents came together, they defined what they needed, they decided, they got help, they worked with other people, but they got their legislation passed. And this is a group of moms who've been working on it for years and felt so hopeless that it was ever going to change, and then it did.
And it did.
And then it did.
Well, that's one of the things that we plan to do, is to put in some trainers to help people learn to be advocates. I call them educators, not lobbyists.
True, and that's why I call them advocates and not lobbyists
exactly.
either. It's like, advocate for yourself.
And people are scared about it, but really together we can be excited and we can support each other, and we will know how to go in and do this, both at the Board of Supervisors, at the Board of Education in Richmond, at the General Assembly, and also with our representatives on the Hill. So I think there's a great way. We're going to have to surf the wave of the election and find out what happens. Are we going to be celebrating some things and getting together to do that? Are we going to be crying together? But whatever C word it is, we're going to find a way to continue to support each other and move into that next step, because there's a lot to be done. And honestly, we do not want to be the people that said, that someone would say to us, why didn't they say something? Why didn't
you say something or do something? Or why didn't you show up?
Exactly.
Why didn't you show up?
Why didn't you show up? I mean, I think the Women's March was about, we don't know what we're going to do, and we don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do something.
Right here.
Yeah.
We're going to do something. And that signaled that to the world. And they stood in solidarity with so many people around the world that it was just awe-inspiring.
It was heartwarming. It really was.
So I think after the election, too, we need to help people understand that go from big, audacious goals, maybe, to what can we do today, tomorrow, next week, next year.
Good.
I was telling you about the quote from the president of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She said the one thing that organizations tend to do is overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. And I sit on the Board of Equality Virginia, and my example is in 2006, the voters amended our Virginia Constitution to make marriage between one man and one woman. And 10 years later, we had marriage equality in Virginia. And between then and then, let me tell you, we worked on it year after year after year after year, thinking it's hopeless, and then it was done.
And there it was.
So we should all remember the things where we can point and say, it took a long time, but we did it.
You remind me, with this 10-year horizon, that I have got to stay in shape, Catherine.
You do.
You know, there's part of this that's self-care too, right?
There is, you do.
Because we get calls, as I'm sure you do, and with your list of activities, you are busy. So a piece of this is how do you take care of yourself when you feel your mission is always to love your neighbor or to love the stranger. You got to be careful.
You know, it's the airline analogy. Put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on the person who needs help, right?
Yeah, right.
We do have to put the oxygen mask on ourselves, and you're right. You can get burned out. And sometimes when I'm feeling like, oh no, not one more thing, I'm like, okay, I have to stop for a second. Like maybe I can say no to some things and the world will not end.
That's right. A good
love
cup
thy
of
neighbor
tea.
as thyself.
As thyself.
There you go. So I do my best to do as much as possible. But I think this really is about autonomy, community, and spirituality. And I think your organization really has captured that sentiment from the happiness hypothesis quite well. And you're giving people something actionable to do. And so I hope you get lots of calls and lots of emails, and I hope people show up. When do you meet on a regular basis, or do your different groups meet?
After the election, we'll probably meet monthly. So.
And thank you for your passion and your questions.
Absolutely.
They were terrific.
Thank you so much. And keep in mind, too, I want to remind our viewers that on the 14th of October, as the 14th of every month, if you want to get out and do something to tell the NRA that gun violence is about a public health crisis and not a constitutional amendment, that people are dying who shouldn't be, then you are welcome out in front of the NRA in Fairfax on October 14th at 10 a.m. You'll see Jack out there, right?
You're welcome.
You'll see Jack out there. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great, great program. Cindy, Jack, you guys have been so wonderful in sharing your journey.
Thank you for having us. It was great.
So join us next time here on Inside Scoop. We'll talk more about the things that you really care about here in our community.
Great job. Awesome.